In 1954, a widow in rural Kentucky lived on $14 a month from her husband's pension. She ate the same breakfast for 9 years straight. Her doctor said she outlived every neighbor on her road. That breakfast is number 4 on this list. Number 17 was so cheap that the coffee cost more than the meal itself. Number 9 was invented during the Depression by mothers who had nothing but flour, water, and the will to feed their children. These 30 breakfasts never appeared in glossy magazines. They appeared on kitchen tables across America at 6 in the morning, in quiet houses where the radio played soft and the percolator hissed. They were how an entire generation started its day. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 30 forgotten poor man breakfasts from the 1950s for seniors living alone. Number 30, milk toast. Before instant oatmeal, before breakfast cereal owned every aisle of the supermarket, there was milk toast. 2 slices of white bread, toasted dark, buttered while still hot, and laid in the bottom of a shallow bowl. Warm milk, just under a simmer, was poured over the top until the bread soaked through and turned soft at the edges. A pinch of sugar, a dusting of cinnamon if there was any. That was breakfast. For a senior with a sore throat, missing teeth, or a stomach that no longer tolerated heavy food, milk toast was a quiet miracle. It cost almost nothing. A loaf of bread was 16 cents in 1953, and a quart of milk was 21 cents. The whole meal came in under a dime. Mothers had made it for sick children. Now those children were grandparents making it for themselves, and the taste was the same as it had ever been. Number 29, coffee soup. In the hill country of Tennessee and across the immigrant kitchens of Pennsylvania, coffee soup was a real breakfast. Day-old bread torn into a bowl. Hot, black coffee poured over the top until the bread sagged and softened. A spoonful of sugar stirred in. A splash of evaporated milk if it was on the shelf. That was the whole thing. Italian and Polish grandmothers had brought the habit over from the old country, and it survived 3 generations in the coal towns where money was tight and bread never went to waste. For a senior eating alone, coffee soup was warm, sweet, and filling enough to hold off hunger until lunch. Eaten with a spoon. Eaten slow. The bread carried the bitter coffee and the coffee carried the sweet milk, and somehow it all worked. Number 28, cornmeal mush. A handful of cornmeal was stirred into a pot of boiling, salted water, then cooked over low heat for 20 minutes until it thickened into a porridge so dense the spoon stood up in it. A pat of butter melted across the top. A drizzle of molasses. That was breakfast in farmhouses from Iowa to North Carolina. Cornmeal cost 6 cents a pound in 1955, and a 5-pound bag could last a single person 2 weeks. For seniors who had eaten this every morning of their childhood, the smell of mush cooking on the stove was the smell of safety itself. The texture was gentle on old teeth. The cost was almost nothing. And the leftover mush poured into a loaf pan and chilled. Overnight, became tomorrow's fried mush, sliced thick and crisped in bacon grease. A roll of bologna in the icebox cost 30 cents a pound and lasted a week. A senior would slice it thick, cut 2 small notches in the edges so it would lay flat, and drop it in a hot cast iron skillet. The bologna blistered and curled at the edges, swelling in the middle, filling the kitchen with that smoky, salty smell that meant Saturday morning. An egg cracked in beside it, fried in the same grease. Both went between 2 slices of white bread with yellow mustard. This was the proper hot breakfast a working man had eaten for 30 years, and a retiree still made for himself at 67 because nothing else tasted like home in quite the same way. Number 26. Bacon grease toast. Every kitchen in post-war America kept a tin of bacon grease on the back of the stove. It was poured in slowly after every breakfast and saved for cooking later. But on lean mornings, when the bacon itself was gone, that grease became breakfast. A slice of white bread, toasted dry, then dragged through the cold, congealed grease until it absorbed the salt and the smoke. A sprinkle of black pepper. A second slice spread the same way. A senior could eat 2 pieces with a cup of coffee and feel as if they had eaten bacon, because the flavor was all there. Just the meat was missing. Nobody photographed this breakfast. Nobody wrote it down. But it appeared in millions of homes during the cold weeks at the end of every month when the Social Security check had thinned out. Number 25. Sugar bread. White bread, soft and thick, spread heavy with butter or margarine, then sprinkled with white sugar until the surface was almost crusted. Some grandmothers added cinnamon. Some toasted it briefly under the broiler until the sugar caramelized into a thin, crackling shell. This was what mothers made when there was nothing else to give a child for breakfast, and what those same children, now in their 70s, still made for themselves on quiet Tuesday mornings. The bread cost 16 cents. The sugar was already in the canister. It was sweet enough to feel like a treat, and filling enough to hold a stomach until noon. Seniors who grew up with sugar bread remembered the taste with the same warmth other people remembered their grandmother's pie. Number 24. Hot water cornbread for breakfast. In the South, cornbread was not just supper food. A senior could mix a cup of cornmeal with a pinch of salt and a few tablespoons of bacon grease, then stir in just enough boiling water to bind the dough into thick patties. Those patties dropped into a hot greased skillet and crisped golden on both sides in 5 minutes flat. Eaten with a smear of butter and a drizzle of molasses, hot water cornbread was breakfast for thousands of black and white Southern families who had grown up making it the same way their grandmothers had during Reconstruction. Cornmeal was cheap. Bacon grease was free. The whole meal cost pennies and tasted like something a person could be proud of, even alone at a table set for one. Number 23. Creamed eggs on toast. When eggs were plenty but bacon was not, creamed eggs were the answer. 2 hard-boiled eggs, chopped fine. A simple white sauce made of butter, flour, and milk, seasoned with salt and a turn of pepper. The chopped eggs stirred into the warm sauce until everything turned thick and pale and golden flecked. Spooned over 2 slices of toast, this was a breakfast that felt like something you would order at a hotel. Eggs cost about 60 cents a dozen in the mid-1950s. Milk and flour were already in the kitchen. The whole thing took 10 minutes and tasted far richer than its parts. Seniors who were widowed and cooking for themselves for the first time after 40 years of marriage found creamed eggs on toast easy, soft, and dignified. Number 22. Percolator coffee and a saltine. This was breakfast on the days the money was thinnest. Percolator coffee brewed dark and strong on a stove burner that had been used for 40 years. A saltine cracker, plain, eaten dry. Sometimes a second cracker, that was it. A box of saltines cost a dime. A pound of coffee cost about 80 cents and lasted a month if a person was careful. For a senior on a fixed income, this breakfast appeared on the last week before the check came in. There was no shame in it. The coffee was hot. The cracker took the edge off. By 10 in the morning, the worst of the hunger had passed. This was not poverty as tragedy. This was poverty as arithmetic, managed quietly by people who knew how to make Friday's pantry stretch to Monday morning. Number 21. Oatmeal with bacon grease. Long before steel-cut oats and microwaved packets, plain rolled oats simmered in salted water for 10 minutes were the standard breakfast in working-class kitchens. The poor man's twist was the topping. Instead of butter or sugar, a spoonful of bacon grease was stirred into the hot oatmeal until the fat melted and turned the porridge into something savory, smoky, and bulky and unexpectedly satisfying. A pinch of salt, a turn of pepper. That was breakfast. Oats cost 12 cents a pound in 1955, and a single canister lasted a person 3 weeks. The bacon grease added the flavor that meat would have brought without the cost of meat. Seniors who had grown up on farms remembered this as the standard. The sweet versions came later after sugar got cheap. First pattern break. Here is something the cereal companies do not advertise. The breakfasts on this list are not just cheap food from a forgotten era. They are the breakfasts that kept American seniors fed and independent through decades when there was no microwave, no convenience aisle, and no delivery service. A senior in 1957 woke up alone in a small house, walked to the kitchen on hips that ached, and made breakfast with what was on the shelf. That was the whole arrangement. There was no other option, and what they made fed them. It nourished them. It got them through the morning and into the afternoon. The cereal industry spent the next 30 years convincing us that breakfast had to come from a box. It did not. It never did. Cold biscuits left over from yesterday's supper, split open and warmed briefly in the oven, then spread thick with apple butter from a quart jar put up the previous fall. Apple butter cost almost nothing to make if a person had a tree, and most rural seniors did. A jar lasted half the winter. Spread on a warm biscuit with a smear of butter beneath, it was breakfast that tasted like fall itself, deep and spicy and dark with cinnamon and clove. The biscuit was already paid for. The apple butter was free, and the whole meal cost nothing more than the time it took to warm the oven. Seniors in Pennsylvania, Virginia, and the Ohio Valley made this breakfast all winter long without ever thinking of it as poor man's food. Number 19, mush and milk. The simplest breakfast on this list and one of the most enduring. Last night's leftover cornmeal mush, sliced cold from the pan, dropped into a bowl and covered with cold milk. A spoonful of sugar. That was it. No frying, no warming, no stove at all. For a senior with arthritis who could not stand long enough to cook a proper breakfast, mush and milk was the answer. The mush had already been made. The milk was in the icebox. The whole bowl came together in 2 minutes and required nothing more than a spoon. Children had eaten this for centuries before breakfast cereal existed. Seniors in 1955 still made it because it worked, because it cost nothing, and because the taste of cold mush and cold milk reminded them of their own grandmothers. Number 18, fried potatoes and onions. Leftover potatoes from the night before, sliced thin, dropped into a skillet with a spoonful of bacon grease and a sliced onion, then fried slowly until the potatoes turned golden at the edges and the onions melted into sweet ribbons. Sometimes a beaten egg was poured over the top in the last minute. Sometimes nothing but salt and pepper. This was the breakfast of farmers, factory workers, and the seniors those workers became. Potatoes cost about $3 for a 50-pound bag at a farm market. Onions came from the garden and lasted in the cellar all winter. The whole skillet cost pennies and fed a person until lunch. Fried potatoes for breakfast vanished from the American table when frozen hash browns took over. The flavor went with it. Number 17, hardtack and coffee. This is the breakfast cheaper than the coffee that washed it down. Hardtack, those dense, unleavened crackers of flour, water, and salt, had survived from the Civil War into the kitchens of frugal seniors who remembered their grandfathers eating them. A piece of hardtack soaked for 30 seconds in hot, black coffee turned soft enough to chew. A second piece followed. The salt of the cracker mixed with the bitter of the coffee, and somehow it became a meal. A homemade batch of hardtack cost almost nothing and lasted 6 months in a tin without going stale. For a senior on the very tightest budget, this was breakfast on the days when there was not enough money for anything else, and it was eaten without complaint, because complaining did not feed anyone. Number 16, drop biscuits and sorghum. A cup of flour, a spoonful of lard, a pinch of salt, a teaspoon of baking powder, and just enough buttermilk to bring it together into a thick batter. Spoonfuls dropped onto a greased pan and baked 12 minutes until the tops turned pale gold. Split open while still warm, those biscuits were drowned in dark sorghum molasses that pooled on the plate and ran down the side. Sorghum cost 50 cents a quart in 1956, and a single bottle lasted a single senior 3 months. The biscuits were a few cents apiece. This breakfast was the standard across the rural South for the better part of a century, and the seniors who ate it in 1955 had been eating it since 1895. The flavor was so deeply familiar, it felt like memory. Number 15, pancakes with corn syrup. Maple syrup was for rich people. Working families used corn syrup. A senior would mix a cup of flour, an egg, a spoonful of sugar, a pinch of baking powder, and enough milk to thin the batter, then ladle it onto a hot, greased griddle. The pancakes turned golden and lifted at the edges. Stacked on a plate with a square of margarine and a slow drizzle of Caro light corn syrup, breakfast was served. A bottle of Caro cost 25 cents and lasted 6 weeks. The pancakes themselves were nothing more than pantry staples. For a senior who had grown up with corn syrup on every breakfast plate, the taste of real maple was unfamiliar and almost unwelcome. Caro was what breakfast tasted like. Caro was home. Number 14, sardines on crackers. Second pattern break. The food industry would prefer you forget this one. A small tin of sardines packed in oil cost about 12 cents in 1954. A senior could open that tin, lay the small silver fish onto saltine crackers, add a squeeze of lemon if available, and a turn of black pepper, and eat the whole tin in 5 minutes for breakfast. The sardines provided more calcium, more omega-3 fatty acids, and more protein per dollar than anything else in the supermarket. They still do. Doctors today recommend sardines specifically for seniors with bone density concerns and heart health worries. The seniors who ate them in 1955 did not know any of that. They ate sardines because they were cheap, because they kept forever in the can, and because the salty, oily fish on a dry cracker was a flavor that satisfied something that nothing else in the kitchen could touch. Number 13, hot chocolate and toast. Hot chocolate with buttered toast for breakfast. On a cold January morning, when the wind came through the window cracks and the kitchen took 20 minutes to warm up, a senior would heat a saucepan of milk on the stove and stir in 2 heaping spoonfuls of cocoa powder and a spoonful of sugar. They whisked it until it foamed at the edges, then poured it into a thick ceramic mug with 2 slices of buttered toast on the side. That was breakfast. Cocoa powder cost about 18 cents for a small tin, and it lasted 3 months. The milk was already there. The toast was nothing. For a senior who had grown up before central heating, hot chocolate for breakfast was not a children's drink. It was a survival drink, a way to warm the body from the inside on mornings when warmth was the most expensive thing in the house. Number 12, hominy grits and butter. Across the South, grits were not a side. Grits were the meal. A cup of stone-ground hominy grits simmered in salted water for 20 minutes, stirred occasionally so they did not stick until they thickened into a creamy white porridge. A pat of butter dropped in the center, melting into a yellow puddle, a turn of black pepper. That was breakfast for a senior in Charleston or Savannah or Mobile, eaten the same way it had been eaten for 200 years. Grits cost about 9 cents a pound in 1955, and a bag lasted weeks. The texture was soft enough for the oldest mouths. The flavor was simple enough that nobody ever got tired of it. And the steam rising from the bowl on a cool autumn morning was the smell of every kitchen across the entire Low Country at 7 in the morning. Number 11, scrambled eggs in bacon grease. When bacon itself was gone but the grease tin was still full, a senior could scramble 2 eggs in a tablespoon of that saved fat and end up with scrambled eggs that tasted like there had been bacon in the pan that morning. The trick was low heat, slow stirring, and patience. The eggs came out soft and golden, threaded with smoky pork flavor that no plain butter could match. Eaten with a slice of buttered toast, this breakfast cost 8 cents and felt like a Sunday meal. The bacon grease tin sat on the back of every stove in America in 1955. It was never empty for long, and it turned ordinary scrambled eggs into something that fed the soul as much as the stomach. Number 10, French toast with stale bread. Stale bread was not waste. Stale bread was tomorrow's French toast. A senior would beat 2 eggs with a splash of milk and a pinch of cinnamon. Dip thick slices of dried-out bread into the mixture until they were saturated, and fry them in butter in a medium skillet until both sides were crisp and golden. A drizzle of corn syrup or molasses on top finished it. That was breakfast made entirely from things that would otherwise have gone in the bin. The French had not invented this. American grandmothers had, and they had been making it for 100 years before anyone called it French. For a senior who hated waste with the moral seriousness of someone who had lived through rationing, French toast was both breakfast and a small ethical victory. Number 9, flour and water pancakes. Third pattern break. This is the breakfast invented by Depression-era mothers who had nothing but flour, water, and the will to feed their children. 1 cup of flour, a pinch of salt, a teaspoon of baking powder if available, and enough water to make a thin batter. The batter was ladled onto a hot, greased skillet and cooked until lightly browned. It was eaten with a smear of bacon grease or a sprinkle of sugar. No eggs, no milk, no butter, nothing but the cheapest possible ingredients. The pancakes were dense, almost rubbery, and bore little resemblance to the fluffy ones at a diner. But they filled a stomach. Seniors who had grown up eating these still made them in 1958 on the days when the icebox was empty, not out of habit, but out of the deep. Memory that this had once been the difference between eating and not eating. In the kitchens of North Carolina, liver mush was breakfast. A loaf of pork liver mixed with cornmeal, seasoned with sage and pepper, sliced thick, fried until crisp on both sides, and slipped between 2 slices of white bread with a smear of yellow mustard. The texture was creamy at the center and crackling at the edges. The flavor was deep, mineral, almost beefy. A pound of liver mush cost about 25 cents in 1955 and made breakfast for a week. The liver itself, packed with iron and vitamin B12, was exactly the kind of nutrition older bodies needed most. Seniors in the Piedmont still make this breakfast at 80, frying the same brand from the same butcher their mothers used. Outside of a few counties in 2 states, liver mush has been almost entirely forgotten. Inside those counties, it remains breakfast. Number 7, biscuits and white gravy. The original poor man's breakfast of the South. 2 pillowy biscuits, split open and drowned in a thick white gravy made from bacon grease, a spoonful of flour, and a slow pour of milk, seasoned heavily with black pepper. A senior could make biscuits and gravy for under a quarter and feel as if they had eaten breakfast at a roadside diner. The gravy was the trick. It stretched a few cents of fat and milk into something rich enough to feel like a real meal. The biscuits soaked it up. The pepper cut through it. The whole plate sat heavy in a stomach for hours. This was the breakfast that fed coal miners, mill workers, sharecroppers, and the seniors those workers became. It still fills diner menus across Tennessee and Kentucky. In private kitchens, it is rarer every year. Number 6, cottage cheese on toast. By the 1950s, cottage cheese had become the cheap protein of choice for elderly Americans on tight budgets. A small carton cost about 19 cents and lasted 3 breakfasts. A senior would spread a thick layer of cold cottage cheese onto a slice of warm toast, sprinkle a little salt and pepper, and eat it slowly with a cup of coffee. The cool, creamy cheese against the warm, crisp toast was a contrast that felt almost luxurious. The protein and calcium were exactly what aging bones and muscles needed. The whole breakfast came together in less than 2 minutes, with no cooking and no cleanup. Cottage cheese on toast appeared in dozens of senior nutrition guides published by county extension offices in the late 1950s. It has since been replaced by yogurt, which costs 3 times as much and offers nothing meaningfully better. Number 5, fried apples and biscuits. Apples sliced thin were dropped into a skillet with a spoonful of butter, a sprinkle of brown sugar, and a shake of cinnamon, then cooked low until the slices softened into a sticky, fragrant compote. Spooned hot over a split biscuit, this breakfast tasted like apple pie at 6 in the morning. A senior with a tree in the backyard could make this for nothing through the entire fall. Even a senior buying apples at the store paid only 10 cents a pound in 1955. The biscuits cost a few pennies. The whole breakfast cost almost nothing and felt like a celebration. Seniors in West Virginia and Southern Ohio made this every Sunday morning of October, and they remembered the smell of cinnamon and butter long after they could no longer make it for themselves. Number 4, oatmeal with brown sugar and raisins. This was the breakfast a Kentucky widow ate every day for 9 years. Rolled oats simmered in milk and water for 10 minutes until thick. A spoonful of brown sugar was stirred in. A handful of raisins went in for the last 2 minutes, so they plumped soft. A pat of butter on top. That was breakfast. Oats cost 12 cents a pound. Raisins cost about 25 cents for a small box that lasted 3 weeks. Brown sugar was always in the canister. The whole bowl came in under 15 cents and provided fiber, slow carbohydrates, iron, and the warm comfort that no cereal in a box has ever matched. The widow's doctor said her cholesterol numbers were better than her son's. She lived to 94. She ate this every single morning. On the morning she died, there was a cooled bowl of it still sitting on her counter. Number 3, hot chocolate with bread chunks. In the immigrant kitchens of New York and Boston, this was a child's breakfast that grew up to become a senior's breakfast. A mug of hot chocolate made from cocoa powder, sugar, and milk, with chunks of day-old bread torn in and allowed to soak until they sagged soft, eaten with a spoon. The bread absorbed the chocolate held the warmth, and the whole bowl became a kind of edible blanket on cold mornings. A senior with shaky hands could eat it without spilling. A senior with no appetite could finish it because it was sweet and gentle. The breakfast cost about a nickel and tasted like the safest part of childhood. Italian, Polish, and Portuguese seniors all made versions of this. The names were different. The bowl was the same. Number 2, pinto bean breakfast with cornbread. In Appalachia, last night's pinto beans were not just supper leftovers. A senior would warm a bowl of pintos on the back burner, crumble cold cornbread into the hot beans, and eat the whole thing with a tall glass of cold buttermilk. The beans gave protein and iron. The cornbread gave starch. The buttermilk gave calcium and the kind of sour bite that woke a person up better than coffee. This breakfast cost almost nothing because the beans had already been paid for at supper. The cornbread had been baked alongside them. The buttermilk was a few cents a glass. Coal miners in West Virginia ate this breakfast at 5 in the morning before going underground. The seniors, those miners, still ate it at 7 in the morning 40 years later, sitting alone at the same table where they had once fed 5 children. Number 1, coffee and a biscuit. In the end, the most enduring senior breakfast in America was the simplest one of all. A cup of coffee brewed strong and black on the stove. A single biscuit, cold from yesterday or warm from this morning, split open and spread with a smear of butter or a drag of bacon grease. That was the whole meal. It cost less than a dime. It took less than 5 minutes. It required almost no standing, almost no cleanup, almost nothing from a body that ached after another night of bad sleep. And it appeared on more breakfast tables across more decades in more parts of America than any meal on this list. Widows ate it, widowers ate it, retired farmers, retired teachers, retired mill workers, retired everything ate it. The biscuit gave just enough substance to take the edge off. The coffee gave the rest of what a person needed to face the day. There was no shame in this breakfast. There was only the quiet competence of someone who had been feeding themselves for 60 years and knew exactly what was enough. Here is the challenge. Pick one of these and make it tomorrow morning. Make the milk toast, the fried potatoes, or the pinto beans and cornbread. Sit at the kitchen table, not the couch. Pour the coffee. Eat slowly. These breakfasts were never about being poor. They were about being capable, about feeding yourself with dignity in a quiet kitchen at sunrise. Tell me in the comments which one you are going to try. I want to know if anyone else's grandmother made coffee soup or if your grandfather ate sardines on crackers. These were not just meals. They were proof that breakfast alone, made simple, made cheap, made by your own hands, can still be the best part of the day.